If you feel like you're stuck in a loop, swearing you'll quit, only to relapse days or even hours or even minutes later, you're not alone. Most guys never break the cycle, and it's not because they're weak. The reason, there's a reason you keep slipping back, and it's not what you think. Now, number one, your environment, right? You're relying on things like willpower, right, to keep you going, right? You try to discipline yourself. Of course, we're men. We want to be strong and all that. So you say, all right, I don't need help. I don't need anyone. I'm just going to discipline myself to get exactly what I want. And let me move this here a bit. I'm going to discipline myself, grind it out and make sure that I'm successful. And if you think and you really look back to how that method has worked for you, right? I mean, odds are it's probably not that well. You think maybe 30 days back, a months back, years back. And a lot of times, majority of you watching this are in the exact same place, right? You're in the exact same place that you've been for a while because you're trying to rely on a finite source, right? Willpower can only last you so long, right? It's something that people can try to use as a method, but why would you take the harder route? Why wouldn't you set up your environment to make it easier for you? Why wouldn't you take initiative and think about, man, what are the patterns that I actually have that's causing me to, relapse, stay in this cycle, right? And especially if you have PIED, man, that's even tougher because you're in a position to where you can't even get in the ball game probably of a relationship if you're dealing with that, right? Which makes this cycle even worse, right? So think about and cut out willpower, cut out discipline. That's not what you want, right? Make it as easy as possible. Set up your environment, cut off, the temptation, and make it easy to win. Why would you make it harder on yourself? You have so many other things that you probably want to do, and this is holding you back. So make it easy on yourself. And don't be hard. Don't be hard headed. Number two, you haven't addressed the triggers that set you off, right? And we have a couple things, right? So you have two sides of triggers, right? You have emotional triggers, and then you have what? You have actual, you could say online or physical triggers, right? So emotional triggers you can think of, for example, is stress, right? Let's say you had a long day at work, you've been grinding, right? They just been putting a ton of pressure on you, right? And you have a ton of stress and you say, I need to relieve that stress. And what happens? A lot of people run to the vices, right? And it's not only the corn, it's things like, alcohol, drugs, all of these things, they run to the vices, right? The thing is, the corn is just easy to access, right? Versus some of these other things you have to maybe be a certain age to get to, versus, the corn is just accessible if you have internet access and a phone, which if you're watching this, you probably do, right? And then you have things like boredom as well, right? So people get bored, they want some excitement, and you have to think this is really a form of entertainment and people use it to escape their problems. But the problem is with that is the more that you use something to escape your problems, the bigger the problems get and you actually make no progress, right? So you look back a year, 2 years, and you see that you're still in the same position because you had this opportunity, right, to deal with a problem, to get through it, but instead you ran to something that gets your mind off of it. And what happens when you run like this is you never solve the problem, and that's why a lot of you are still in that same exact spot. And then especially, we also have to remember things like social media, you know. I'd say social media in general. You could even throw in, I guess, dating apps if you want to in there. But social media, right? So what you see, and even TV, right? Especially with men, our brains are wired in a certain way to where we see certain things on the internet and it just causes that insane dopamine spike, right? It just shoots through the air, right? And what happens? It starts the cycle over again. You're right, you probably end up relapsing, right? So you have to address and think of these triggers and what actually causes you to get to that point of relapse, right? Because a lot of people never take the inventory. They just have this idea that eventually they'll willpower themselves out of it, that something will happen. But majority of you are in the same exact spot, right? So you have, and even TV shows, movies, all of these things can be risky, especially for the male mind, especially, you just got to think about that, right? Because our brain really can't tell the difference between that IRL stimuli and then the online stimuli. So what happens is people would train themselves for those triggers that are online, and then what happens? You get to a point to where you have an opportunity, right, to have some relationships, and your arousal in your brain is just all over the place. You can't even perform because you've conditioned your mind so much to just being glued to pretty much pixels, right? Call it what it is. Number three, you're not tracking patterns, right? This is one that I didn't do for a long time, but when I did, it provided a ton of clarity for me into those weak areas, right? So when we talk about patterns, right, what are patterns? Patterns are things that continuously happen over and over again, right? And the thing here with patterns, right, is you take a pattern to actually relapse, right? If you think about it. So maybe you are on Instagram, maybe you're on Twitter, maybe you're on Reddit, whatever you are, maybe it's just even in person or something like that, right? And what happens is you see these certain stimuli and something triggers you, right? It triggers your brain and puts you in that cycle of, all right, man, I gotta relapse. Or it could even be emotional triggers as well, right? But what happens is when you take inventory of these types of patterns that are going on and you think, man, this is it, and a lot of times what's crazy is the same exact thing over and over again. You're just not paying attention, right? So Instagram is a big one for a lot of people, right? So on Instagram their goal, right, to keep you on the website as long as possible. And how are they going to do that? They're going to show you things that are going to keep you on there as long as possible. So for men, what is that, right? Of course, it's provocative images, right? And what happens is you see those types of images and it makes you want to keep scrolling, and you want even more dopamine after seeing that. So it's almost like a cycle, right? When you get a little bit, you want more and more and more. And what does it do? It wastes more time, and you keep scrolling. And then what happens? Man, you probably open up the browser, you go to a certain website, man, and let's just say your streak is over at that point. You end up relapsing. So taking those patterns and just internalizing them can help you even build out a plan to block things in the first place, right? Because if you say, okay, I know the pattern, if I just don't go here, what's going to happen? You're interrupting the cycle, which in turn can give you that control back. Because a lot of you feel like you don't have any control over this, right? And the thing is, a lot of times you never had a solid plan in place, and you try to just use things like willpower, which is setting you up for failure every time. So take inventory of your patterns for sure. I guarantee it'll make a difference. And number four, you believe you can white knuckle your way out instead of building new habits. Right, so we always say only crazy people think they can do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. And this is no different, right? And I think I know a lot of times there's pride in this type of situation because you think, okay, there's other areas where I was able to kind of manage, and you're managing here as well. But it's not ideally where you would want to be, right? You know that. You don't want to have that conversation with somebody, maybe a significant other, and you're in that place to where you can't perform, right? It's embarrassing. Who would want to have that conversation? And also, you don't want to have that conversation to where you're basically not showing up for those people around you, right? So there's people that depend on you, and even things like leaving your legacy on this earth, you're not able to do. You're not able to do because you literally can't perform. You're in this cycle over and over again, right? And what happens? You start to have, I'm sure people go through things like depression, right? You start to doubt if you can actually change things. And even at a time, I'm sure you even think, is this even possible? Is it even possible to break an addiction like this, right? And the thing is, of course you're going to have these type of thoughts if you're doing the same patterns over and over again and expecting a different result. And of course, right, there's ego and pride involved in it because us as men, we want to be strong, right? But the thing is, if someone has been in a situation you've been before, why wouldn't you learn from them, right? You have an opportunity to learn from someone who's been exactly where you've been, and you could solve the problem in a way shorter period of time. Think about how much time you've wasted going back and forth about saying one day, okay, I'm gonna quit, and then you turn around and relapse. Just think about how many times you've done that, right? It's probably 1,000 plus, 100,000. It's been so many different times, right? So the thing is, while you're stuck in that cycle, all you're doing is wasting time, wasting your life, not reaching your full potential. And you know the key ingredients to reaching any type of, and a lot of you have goals, the three ingredients that you want to reach any type of goal: time, energy, attention, right? And if you can get those back, you can absolutely change your life. Now if you're tired of relapsing, right, and you're dealing specifically with PIED, and you want something that actually works, man, click the link in the description below. It's probably in the comment section as well. Book a free call. Let's see how I can help you fix this. Tap in, man. Don't stay in the same place. Don't let this opportunity go by you without clicking that link. Click the link. Let's talk soon. Peace.